Okay, folks, this is part two. Part one, I had to stop, but this is part two. Part two of my, series concerns my assertion that the strong mayor form of government that was voted in with Jerry Brown when he ran for mayor in 1998 and then took office in 2000 is simply not right for Oakland anymore and allows mob rule. Now, where I left off when I had to stop was temporarily was enlisting the number of chief administrative officers that Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf had, basically saying, hey, look, we've got instability. And I remember having a conversation about this with now former council member Lynette Gibson McElhaney. And at first she disagreed that we had instability. I said, yeah, you should check it out. This is 5 years ago. I said, we've had a chief administrative officer basically every 2.2 years. In other words, under the mayor's term then, you were quite likely to see more than one city administrative officer during that person's term. Now, why is that important? Because it's a sign of bureaucratic instability, which particularly damages our ability to execute successfully long-term public projects. That's why it's taken us so long, for example, to build a ballpark or a convention center or, well, you name it. Oakland does not have, outside the Port of Oakland itself, a great current example of large-scale public-private partnerships that benefit Oaklanders economically. The examples that we're starting to get are from the private sector. And if you take a look at Jerry Brown's 10K project when he wanted to build 10,000 units of market rate housing in downtown, that attracted private sector investment, basically white institutional money that previously skipped over Oakland because Oakland was predominantly black and we lived in a society that was exceptionally racist, even more so than it is today from a standpoint of investment. And Jerry came in being white and a celebrity, and in one fell swoop, by his actions, got rid of it, but used 10K to conduct a new type of urban renewal, but with the same result. It removed black people from Oakland under the idea of elegant density. It was fine. This is a digression. When we had redevelopment, because redevelopment had a 20% tax increment financing revenue set aside for affordable housing. So Oakland always had a healthy stock of affordable housing. But at the time we needed to improve on it, that stock, Jerry Brown took our punch bowl away in 2011. And then we had a ramp up of tech employees and a transformation of the Bay Area economy into a social media-based tech system for many firms, either directly or indirectly, in terms of economic production. Look at Uber, Lyft, Facebook, YouTube. You get the idea, okay? All based here in the Bay Area, the modern Detroit. And the market rate housing that was built, as you know, pushed Oaklanders out and in some cases onto the street. And we're still feeling the impact of that dynamic, uninterrupted. All of that happened because of Jerry Brown's 10K system and the installation of strong mayor assured that the 10K system would remain because we had so much instability that you didn't have and don't have a city administrator, unlike a city manager, that's in long enough to really get his or her staff in place to really do any proper city building. We have parks and fire stations and pools and a livable city where even those who need extremely affordable housing can find it. And we have a city that doesn't look like, it's been bombed out or something like that in certain places. Where we are is that because of this instability at the top with the city administrator, you have a revolving door staff under the city administrator. And what we've had in Oakland is a complete loss of institutional memory. The real problem with respect to the athletics and Howard Terminal is simply that the city of Oakland does not have, by the mayor's own admission, recently in an interview, a press conference that I was part of and is on Zenny62 YouTube here, the mayor admitted that it's been so long since the city of Oakland did redevelopment that they'd forgotten how to do it. Well, I didn't. As an intern with the redevelopment agency in 1987, I was trained to do just that: tax increment financing, business retention and attraction, economic development. That's what I went to grad school to do in Berkeley. That's why I studied undergraduate school at Texas Arlington. Okay? But people like me do not grow on trees anymore in California. And the city of Oakland has suffered for it in this matter of Howard Terminal and the athletics. Yet the electorate that has put in Libby and the people that she's put in as staff are too prideful to admit that. And then on top of that, they tend to hire who they know rather than within any fabric or framework, that says, hey, you have to have so many consultants, qualified black, qualified female, and so on. So what we got was what we saw with the County of Alameda presentation, all white group. The city administrator been with us for about a year. Ed Riskin came over from San Francisco. He was director of the transportation department for 8 years. Never sniffed redevelopment. And so the mayor kept Ed back in the shadows until I said, hey, where's Ed? And she started to present him. By contrast, we had a council manager form of government. We had a city manager. The city manager was the technical face of the city. You didn't have the mayor out trying to pretend like, in this case, she was the city manager, understanding details regarding tax increment financing that she had never had to deal with before. You had the city manager or the city administrator or point person who was a true expert, but more important than sound bites, actually knew how to get a project done. And we have had successes under people like that. The Rotunda, for example, with Pat Cashman working with Phil Tagami. There are others I can name. But the bottom line is, while there are base hits here and there, we do not have a large-scale convention center in Oakland. We do not have anywhere that can capture a large convention client, say a new television network that might want to come here for the Super Bowl, if we can host a Super Bowl. I am the only person in NFL history to have worked to try and bring the Super Bowl to Oakland. That is an exercise in asking one question: where does your city measure up or not in its ability to host a large-scale event? Answer: not well. We're about 5,000 hotel rooms short. Nothing's been done to correct that. With respect to convention space, I can tell you, we're 1 million square feet short. I can go on and on and on. We don't have a cemented in place technical class of people, public administrators, that we can turn around and say have been, for the most part, lifers who remember how to get things done. So this system and this instability at the top has created this problem where we're left to mob rule, where the city council, for the first time in our history, is the main chief spokesperson on a large-scale project. I'm talking about Howard Terminal, that they don't even know anything really about. They're dealing with financial approaches they're not familiar with. I am. They're dealing with consultants that don't have anyone to check them because of the lack of talent, intellectual horsepower to understand what they're doing. So a person like me emerges because, again, I was educated that way. But that would not be the case if we had a council manager form of government and the city manager, rather than the city administrator, was in place. We would have a longer set of tenures, longer set of times. But now we have people who want to have term limits on council members. No. At a time when we have rapidly advancing technologies, viruses we don't even know where they came from, and all kinds of rampant changes brought on directly and indirectly by digital communications, you need some stability. We need stability. And what others like Brooke Levin, I saw your comment on Facebook about it. I 1,000,000,000% disagree. You are going to commit us to the dogs, worse than we already are. Because if you think it's hard to achieve consensus to do anything now, you just keep installing these little bitty ways to ensure instability, like, oh, 2 years you're out, 4 years you're out. No. We should have discipline to allow a public administration staff to develop. We don't have that. And again, I've had people say to me, well, I can understand tax increment financing. I mean, I was a CFO. So I say that because what we're getting is we're getting an electorate that doesn't understand the importance of having a well-educated set of public officials that understand how to solve problems and understand what tools to use. I was there when we had the original charter committee that was called for by Dick Spies and Richard Winnie. In fact, I remember an old Oakland Tribune article where it was on the front page, and you had Dick on one side, who just turned 94. Happy birthday to Dick Spies. Love to talk to him about this. He just turned 94. But Dick was on one side and Richard Winnie, rest in peace, was on the other, facing off. Because they had different ideas. Jane Bruner was our District 1 council member. She was part of the committee. I was covering as columnist for the Montclarian, my first news organization gig, if you will. My training, urban planning, Berkeley, Texas, Arlington. Internships in Dallas, Fort Worth, and the city of Oakland. Develop the area redevelopment economic model that could be used in any redevelopment or for any redevelopment project area in any city in the state of California. Anyway, the point I'm making is that then redevelopment directed the city of Oakland, and we had a solid redevelopment staff. And if council manager form of government remained, or even a hybrid form, out of that committee, rather than what we got, we would have been better off. But what happened at the time was it had something called a concern about accountability. That is, the complaint that Mayor Harris issued initially was that people expect him to be able to make change, but he doesn't have the power. When Measure F, what it was originally called, was brought to the voters, they rejected it. The reason is that the most likely to vote people in Oakland were Hills people who were white. And they didn't want someone black to have that kind of power. They didn't want Elihu to have that kind of power, but they wanted Jerry to have it. Because Jerry came in and said all the right things from their perspective, like, for example, wanting to dismantle the black power structure. You should look at Oakland from a racist lens perspective, a racist actor perspective, because if you look at Oakland from a racist actor perspective, you will see just how much of the direction or the growth of our city has been governed by racism. That's a fact. But I digress. In fact, it's that history which drives me to say that we need a council manager or city manager form of government to assure stability at a time when racist ideas and communications are being transmitted at rapid pace through our society, and we're getting pressures to change our very governments, sometimes against our will, even though we fight that. Now we have talk that democracy itself is under attack. Well, assuring term limits for council members and the maintenance of this kind of instability is only going to get us attempts at silencing other people. We won't have a professional class. We'll have people yelling at each other, and they'll try to implement laws either by force or by trickery that wind up keeping some people from voting. You need a professional class in place to protect us from us. I repeat, we need a professional class of people in place to protect us from us. And that is why I contend that we need some form of city manager government to replace the strong mayor system we have. Subscribe to Zenny62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com.